Hi, I'm Jackie Stika, President of Como Friends. Welcome to Bouquets Live. We're so glad that you're joining us tonight as we showcase what is most special about the zoo and the conservatory. We have beautiful flowers and wild and precious animals. And thank you for your support for Como Park Zoo and Conservatory tonight. By purchasing tickets for bouquets, bidding on the silent auction, and making a donation, you help give Como the extra care and funding it needs to thrive. Your gifts support free and equitable access for all Como visitors, the best health care possible for the animals at Como Zoo, and expert care for the gardens and flowers at the Marjorie McNeely Conservatory. The Marjorie McNeely Conservatory is one of just a few gardens left that still do rotating flower shows because of the cost and the time needed to produce them. You can see here the beautiful winter flower show at the conservatory. Please make your gift tonight in support of a 100-year-old tradition of rotating flower shows in the Marjorie McNeely Conservatory. Thank you for your generosity. And now, please enjoy a glimpse of the colorful winter flower show in the Sunken Garden.
Good evening. My name is Dave Kuennen. I'm the owner of BrightWines, and I'm standing here in the Fern Room of Como Conservatory to talk about the Bouquets wine and food and beer event, wine tasting and tour of the gardens that we'll be having this evening. I'm here to speak about the wine, and I'm going to take you on a virtual tour, if you will, of the wine tasting stations that we have scattered throughout the conservatory here this evening. We'll begin our evening with the Bouquets Plus experience, where folks get to come in a little earlier to the event itself and have some special wine and food treats. And that's going to be held in the Ordway Gardens, which are just over this way. In that room, we're going to have a wine table staffed by Bouquets Imports, one of our favorite wine vendors. In fact, they are the traditional Bouquets Plus and VIP experience wine vendor. They'll be wearing two hats this evening. They're going to have a wine tasting station open to the Bouquets Plus experience, and then they'll be transitioning to a wine tasting table that will be for the main event. One of the highlight wines of the Bouquets Plus experience will be a very special Cabernet Sauvignon that they have brought from Alexander Valley called Stuhlmüller Vineyards. And then during the main event, one of my favorite wines from the event is going to be a wine they'll serve that is from Portugal. It is a Douro called Três Bagos. So we're going to have a world tour of wines at this event. Overall, we have 7 tables of wines, if you count the Bouquets Plus experience. And those wines will represent wines from the West Coast, from Europe, from South America, from Australia, from around the world. So I'm just going to give you a quick hint about each one of these wines as we go throughout the evening. The people behind the tables are actually kind of special too. The wine people we have here at this event are the best of the best in the Twin Cities food and wines. In fact, the wine people in particular are, in the case of Bouquets Imports, we have the owner of the company as well as one of their best and most experienced wine sales reps who is a certified sommelier. So the people behind the tables know their wines and can talk about them with you. After that wine experience, the other table we'll have in the Ordway Gardens for the main event is from Tradition Wines and Spirits. Logan is representing perhaps our younger and hip and happening style of wines. Logan will have wines from a winery called Field Recordings. This is a blend that they do called Fiction. We're going to have a wine that is a joint venture called The Fabulist. We're going to have a Field Recordings wine. And this is just an example of kind of the modern era of California winemaking, where it's perhaps not as tied to Napa and Sonoma. A lot of wines from the Central Coast, a lot of wines with a more youthful vibe and energy. Logan himself has a bit of that as well, and he'll be at that table. After that, you could begin your experience for the main event in the entryway to the Tropical Encounters area in the visitor center. There's going to be a wine table there staffed by Postis & Sons, another veteran of the wine industry. In fact, Postis has been with the Bouquets experience pretty much since day one. And Rob will have a whole wide variety of wines. And there, if you're feeling celebratory, one of the wines I like from that table is going to be a cava. And this is an example of a wine that is actually brand new to the Twin Cities. It's never been in the market before. It's actually relatively new to the country. It's imported by the Wente winery, but it's a Spanish cava, which means sparkling wine. It's a champagne method style of sparkling wine from Spain. And that's going to be one of my favorites if you're feeling celebratory. One of the highlights of the event, of course, is the Sunken Garden. So once you've checked in and you've gone through the process of getting into the event, you're certainly going to want to hit the Sunken Garden at some point, because that's the most beautiful spot in the conservatory. And that wine table there is always a real highlight of the event. This year we're pleased to have a company called Rue 38, which sounds like a very French company, and in fact I do buy a lot of French wines from them. One of the favorite wines I'll be having from that table this year is a Rioja. There'll be, again, a new wine to our marketplace. They're showcasing a wine from Spain. It's a Tempranillo. It's a Rioja Reserva, which means it's oak aged, it's bottle aged, and then it's released when it's ready to drink. And so that's a wine to look for at that table. Another really fun spot to sample wines that you get to do at the Bouquets experience is inside the Tropical Encounters. At the back end of Tropical Encounters, there is a little tiki hut that we set up with wines for people to sample. It's a little bit dark, it's a little bit warm, but it's a great spot to taste wines. And if it's you're feeling a little bit tropical, why not pick out a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand? So Rootstock will be staffing that table. Kurt is another wine industry veteran. In fact, Kurt used to own a restaurant that you may know and love, a restaurant and wine bar up in White Bear Lake called Ursula's. He now works on the wholesale side of the business, and they have just introduced a brand new, again, never been in the marketplace before, Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand called Lobster Reef. Noteworthy here is that it's from the 2020 vintage, which was a very good New Zealand wine vintage, very refreshing wines, and is actually a significant step up from the 2021, which unfortunately has been having some supply chain issues and is also a little bit generally weaker vintage. But don't be afraid of the wines. If it makes it to our marketplace, it's probably pretty good wine. You can also go upstairs in the auditorium. We'll have a couple of wine tables upstairs in the auditorium. One of the tables up there is going to be the wine company, another long-standing supporter of the Bouquets wine and food event. And they're going to have a couple of very interesting wines. The one I've got here in my hand is a wine from Joseph Drouhin. It's a white Burgundy, Macon Village, so it's a white unoaked Chardonnay from Burgundy. But there's actually going to be a couple of different wines from this winery at the event, at this same table, because Joseph Drouhin, the company from France, also has a wine in the Willamette Valley. Veronique Drouhin has a winery called Domaine Drouhin in Oregon. And speaking of vintages, let's talk about the 2020. 2020 in the Willamette Valley was actually a smoke-damaged vintage from wildfires. And so there was a difficult winemaking process that year. And what Domaine Drouhin decided to do was not make any Domaine Drouhin 2020 Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. Instead, they have what we call declassified that same fruit, those same wines, and are releasing it in their second label. A label they introduced about a decade ago, I suppose, called Cloudline. And that Cloudline Pinot Noir is actually, in the 2020 vintage, the Domaine Drouhin Oregon Pinot Noir. So you're getting a really good value. I've tasted the wine. There's no smoke taint whatsoever. They did a very good job of selecting that wine. And we have a dry rosé from that same winery. So that table up in the auditorium is going to have a couple of things to look for there. And last and certainly not least, I saved this bottle to show last because it's got a great label. The label is called Wild Thing. It has a lovely, gnarly old vine. It is an old vine Zinfandel painted onto the bottle. This is represented by a company called Vinocopia, another long-standing supporter of Bouquets. Vinocopia is also the company locally that imports and represents the Piatelli winery from Argentina. And over the years, if you bid on wines in the silent auction, you'll often see wines here, big 3-liter bottles of Malbec from Piatelli vineyards in Argentina. Those are coming from this company. But the Wild Thing Zinfandel is one of literally the best wines you can taste here at the event, because this is actually a wine that was in this year's version of the Wine Spectator's Top 100 Best Wines of the Year. So that December 2021 issue came out and ranked this very Zinfandel amongst the best wines of the entire year, which for this winery, Carol Shelton Wines, is actually her third time in the past 5 years having a wine in the top 100. So the wild thing, twice in the past 5 years, has been Wine Spectator Top 100, including this vintage of this wine in this year's Top 100 for an old vine Zinfandel. And then a couple of years ago, she had a white wine from Paso Robles called Coquille Blanc that made Wine Spectator Top 100 too. So clearly one of the best winemakers in California. So I didn't mention anything from Italy here. There will be Italian wines at the event, I assure you. So really, all in all, we have 7 different tables of wine spread throughout the conservatory. You can be in the gardens, you can be in the auditorium, you can be in the entryway, you can get food, you can get wine, you can get beer, and that's your little virtual tour. All of these wines are selected by myself, Dave at BrightWines, and I'll be putting a list out there. It'll be online. You can look at it in the marketplace. You can email me if you want to get more insight. And if you are one of the folks watching from home rather than being at the event this year, I hope this little mini tour perhaps encouraged you to think about next year's event and to see what you missed. We're not trying to make anyone jealous here, but these wines are available to purchase online from the selections tonight. The auction items are available to bid on tonight. So all of that is worth noting, even from the comfort of your own home. So once again, Dave Kuennen, BrightWines, in the Fern Room. No wine table in here this year, but that's okay, maybe next year.
Hi everyone, I'm Bryn Fleming. I'm a horticulturist here at the Marjorie McNeely Conservatory, and today we're in the Orchid House where I can share with you a little bit of the conservatory's orchid collection. We have over 1,500 plants in our collection, focused mostly on Central and South American species orchids, though there are a few exceptions that are hybrids or from some other tropical areas of the world as well. But just within our collection, you can see the huge diversity in flower color, shape, growth habit, and some of my favorites are some of the miniature ones. So I brought a few out for you to take a closer look. I just love the diminutive flowers and tiny growth habit of some of these. Another one of my favorites is this one right here. I'll move it out here where you can see a little bit better. I love some of the deciduous orchids because they kind of go dormant for a little while. You can see this one has no leaves. It looks sort of like nothing's going on, and then it sends these flowers out right at the end of its dormant period. I just love the range of adaptations within the orchid family. It's a huge plant family, and orchids are adapted to live on every continent except Antarctica. So when you start thinking about all the different climates, whether montane, desert, prairie, we have species of orchids that are native to Minnesota. The huge range of adaptations, I think, is the most fascinating part. And with tropical orchids, so many of them are blooming. Right now it's winter. I think you can see the snow behind me outside. There are so many beautiful flowers blooming in the middle of winter. I think that makes orchids a really exciting collection. The Orchid House at the Marjorie McNeely Conservatory is home to about 2/3 of the conservatory's orchid collection. This room provides a climate-controlled space that's home for most of the warmer growing, humidity-loving tropical orchids. And part of this system that is new and really special is our reverse osmosis filtration system. And this lets us provide pure water to some of the species that are a little bit more sensitive to some of the minerals and compounds that could be in our drinking water. And this is a really good example, I'm so glad I can show you all today, of a plant that has all clean, brand new growth. And this has been getting reverse osmosis water for about 1.5 years now. And you can see how the older growth has some of that sensitivity showing in the leaves here in these brown spots. And all the new growth has come out nice and clean and healthy. So the reverse osmosis is helping give that clean water to some of these plants that are just a little bit sensitive to some of the things that are in our regular drinking water. Another one of my favorite orchids in the conservatory's orchid collection is the vanilla, mostly because I think a lot of folks don't realize that vanilla comes from an orchid, and because it has this really unusual vining growth habit. On this table I have several different species of vanilla, so you can see the variation in species, even one that's leafless. But I just love to show people this as kind of an example of the diversity in the orchid family in the growth habit, and that one of the things that we like to eat actually comes from a vanilla flower, an orchid flower. People may not realize that orchids are susceptible to viruses too. And several years ago, we detected 2 different viruses within our orchid collection and systematically tested the whole collection. And the result was that we disposed of about 40% of our orchid collection. And since then, to maintain a healthy collection, we routinely test all of our plants for the 2 different viruses, as well as any of our new acquisitions. Donations have made possible the purchase of test kits and supplies, as well as new plants. And we've added dozens and dozens of new species to our collection, growing the diversity and replacing plants that we lost during our systematic testing. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this little peek into the orchid house today. Please join us at Como and peek through the door and look for our orchid collection on display throughout the conservatory. Thanks.
I'm Becky. I'm one of the aquatics zookeepers here at Como Zoo, and I work with, one of the animals I work with are the polar bears. We do have 3 bears here at Como, and you probably know Neil already. He just turned 26, so pretty old for a male bear. We have Nan, who's 27, and our newest bear here that we're introducing you today is Kulu. He just turned 2 and came here from Columbus Zoo, Ohio, just in October. His parents were ready to start breeding again, and they needed this space, so he came here to live with us. We have been able to introduce him to Nan, the 27-year-old female, and so they've been getting along pretty well. And one of the things we're showing you today is training, the husbandry training that we do with the polar bears. So these are things that help us take better care of the animals, also gets them moving around, get them thinking. So the type of training we do here is operant conditioning training, and it's based on positive reinforcement. So we reinforce the behaviors we're looking for, ignore unwanted behaviors. So he knows a number of different things that one of our keepers, Kristen, is showing us today with training. So he's able to present his paws so that we can check them out, make sure there's nothing wrong with them. He can open his mouth so we can see his teeth, make sure everything is good inside there. He's able to rise up on his back paws and put his front paws up on the mesh so we can see that range of motion. So for example, that's something that Neil, our older polar bear, isn't really able to do anymore with those old hips and arthritis kicking in. Another thing they can do is just move around the exhibit with us. We have a scale also set into the training space. So that's something we do every 2 weeks. We do get a weight on them. And Kulu is about 650 pounds right now. Neil is about 950, so we expect Kulu to get much bigger than he is now. Of course, being 2, he is still growing. And then one of the bigger behaviors that we're going to be working on is blood draw, a voluntary blood draw. This is a behavior that Neil already has. So what that is they put their paws, we ask them to put their paw into a metal sleeve that allows us access to the top of their paw safely. So obviously that's always something that we look at with the polar bears is obviously staying safe for us. And then the blood draw would be from the veins on the top of the paw. So that's something that we will be working on, so that's pretty exciting. We were actually the second zoo here in the US that was able to get a blood sample, voluntary blood sample from a polar bear. So definitely something we're going to be continuing. Well, we hope you have a great day here at Como Zoo. Thanks for visiting.
Hello, I'm Caroline Melhop with Como Friends. I, along with Bethany Paul, our event manager, and the entire Como Friends team, truly appreciate you tuning into our Bouquets program. I hope you enjoyed learning about our award-winning orchid collection, seeing the stunning winter flower show, and of course meeting Kulu, our newest and most energetic polar bear. Of course, Dave Kuennen also gave us wonderful tips on wine and some snippets of information, although is it sippets of information, I guess in this case. And you know, without him we would not have Bouquets, and it wouldn't live up to its name or be as spirited, since he coordinates all of the wines. He also hosts a wonderful auction item that you should bid on if you haven't already. It's wine tasting in the Sunken Garden. Two wonderful things mixed together, wine and flowers. Awesome. Also on the auction is a Beers and Bears experience. Dan Parker, our beer expert, will bring food and beer together in a really cool way. And of course our bears will make an appearance too. Dan also coordinates all of the beers for Bouquets, not a small feat. So we thank him so much for all of his time. I am truly humbled by how much community support we have for Bouquets. From all the restaurants, the breweries, the food and beverage purveyors who donated their time, their resources, participated in the silent auction, and put something on the marketplace. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to you. Your participation is just key and crucial in having a successful event and raising funds for Como. We all know that Como is an extraordinary place and a fabulous zoo and conservatory, but it is so much more to the community. It is so much more to the people that love it and use it. Como is a living classroom that brings kids here and they get inspired to have careers in science, zoology, horticulture, conservation, and so much more. It is also an urban oasis and a respite for people where they can connect with the wonders and wildness of nature. And of course, it is a gathering spot that is welcoming and equitable for everyone. And it is free every day of the year. No wonder it is so special and true and heartfelt that we all love it. Many of you do so much already to support Como, and we are so appreciative of your support. If you are able, please consider making a gift to help Como thrive well into the future, and so that we can have improvements and our education programs can have a statewide reach, and so that everybody that truly loves Como can enjoy it for future generations. Thank you so much for everything that you do for Como, and thank you for joining us this evening.